Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, where every day I talk to a different leader about how technology has transformed their industry. And I got to tell you, I'm quite excited about today's guest. Because on this daily tech podcast, we've covered everything from fintech, edtech, legal tech, blockchain, crypto. And we've even spoken with William Shatner and Wendy Williams, as well as football teams such as Real Madrid and Manchester United. But a subject I am fascinated by is the future of television in a digital world of streaming and YouTube stars. So today's guest is Ted Chervin, who is a founding partner and board member at ICM Partners. And for those of you that don't know, ICM Partners is a talent and literary agency representing clients in the fields of motion pictures, TV, publishing, music, theatre, branded entertainment and digital media. And speaking of TV, ICM Partners' television department represents on-air and creative talent in all segments of the industry, including network, cable and first-run syndication. And it is at the forefront of the industry, with clients that have created many of the longest-running critically acclaimed programming on television. And the agency represents several noted executive producers and other showrunners that have all successfully packaged hit shows such as Grey's Anatomy, Modern Family, The Big Bang Theory, Criminal Minds, House, Breaking Bad, The Simpsons, Sons of Anarchy, Scrubs, The X-Files, and the list goes on and on. And a little research also revealed that Ted was named one of Los Angeles' 500 most influential people by the LA Business Journal a few years ago. And by all accounts, he is Hollywood royalty as far as I'm concerned, but with his own fascinating backstory too. So for those reasons alone, this is an interview that I'm genuinely looking forward to, and I invite you along with me to listen in too. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Los Angeles so we can speak with Ted Chervin from ICM Partners, who's going to talk about the future of television and also what he's seen change over the last 25 years. Massive warm welcome to the show, Ted. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I am the co-managing director of ICM Partners, which is one of the four large talent agencies that controls a big chunk of the talent in the various verticals in Hollywood: film, television, publishing, concert touring, digital branding, and broadcasting.
Now, I'm genuinely thrilled that you managed to join me today, and I think we all have a backstory that shapes us and puts us on the road where we are now. But it's not until we get a little bit older and look back we can then join up the dots. So can I ask what inspired you and put you on this journey? I mean, was it a movie or a TV show or something much more than that, I suspect?
You know, I definitely have my story is a particularly odd one, I think, compared to many people that wind up in Hollywood. I went to college and law school. For me, as a young person, I thought the big victory for me would be just getting a good education. When I went to law school, I got interested in law enforcement, and I wound up joining the United States Attorney's Office in Manhattan during the height of the crack cocaine epidemic and the early part of what they called the war on drugs, which obviously we didn't win. But I did fight it for a while. In my 20s, I was an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, and I specialized in organized crime and cocaine cartels and other non-traditional organized crime groups. And so that was my focus in my 20s. And then I made a real detour and came out here to Los Angeles in 1992, 93 to join a small TV packaging agency that specialized in putting together scripted television shows based on the writer showrunner, who, the people that create and executive produce the shows. The reason I made that change was complicated. Part of it was I actually felt like I had done the thing in law that I would enjoy the most. I also felt, ironically, that even though I had a pretty good pedigree, that there were some limitations for me as a lawyer. I just didn't have the level of passion for law that some of my colleagues did. And so I felt like I wasn't as good at it or as focused and committed to it as I would have liked, which made me start exploring what else I might be interested in. And I always loved, I was an English major in college, loved reading, loved TV, loved movies, sports, music. And that was kind of that general idea of content and loving to consume culture and pop culture is what led me out here. As far as TV shows and films, I think I was like a lot of people of my generation. I loved shows like All in the Family and Taxi. I loved films like The Godfather and Apocalypse Now, and a lot of those great films that came out in the 70s and those great TV shows on the networks in the 70s. And so a lot of that, I think, probably did get me focused on Hollywood, but I'm not sure there was any one thing. It was probably more a totality of circumstances and interests.
Great taste in movies and TV there as well. But I'm curious, I mean, did a Harvard law degree actually prepare you to run an ICM? And are there any similarities at all?
I think that the law school experience for me was applicable to the rest of my life in the sense that in law school they teach you to spot problems and articulate what the issues and problems are, and then to try to come up with a path to solving those problems, or coming up with an ability to make arguments about why a certain issue should be handled a certain way. And I think that problem-solving methodology, that sort of mentality of let me look at this and see what the issues are, that's great training for almost any professional endeavor. But I wouldn't say that there was anything specific in law school that necessarily prepared me. It was more an approach.
We will have people listening of all ages and from various backgrounds all over the world. And I think it would actually be wonderful if you could help set the scene and educate everyone on just how far we've actually come. So can you set the scene and offer an overview of the history of syndication and also the relationship between networks, studios and agencies and how that's changed?
Well, so much is being talked about now and written about in terms of the real disruption in media, in the entertainment business, both in television and film, and frankly in music too. I mean, everything is being upended in part by technology and in part by people's the way people consume and understand pop culture. When I started out, basically there were 3 and then 4 broadcast networks: ABC, CBS, NBC, and then Fox, which in the United States was pretty much the entire game in television. And there were then, a bunch of movie studios that put movies out. That has changed so much with the advent of cable television, with the advent of the streaming services, the over-the-top, streaming services like Netflix and Amazon and Hulu. Syndication was a very particular part of the TV ecosystem in the 1960s and 70s and 80s, for the most part, into the 90s, where those 4 broadcast networks, would put shows on for their first run. And then the studios usually who made the shows would own the shows and all the reruns and would make a bunch of money by selling the reruns to local stations all over the country. And by combining, stations in places like Des Moines, Iowa, Jacksonville, Florida, Houston, Texas, Albany, New York, wherever those stations were located, these studios would take the reruns and go kind of station to station, patch together a way to cover 100% of the country, and then add all that money up that they get from each station. And that was syndication. So the broadcast networks, like a place like ABC, when they ran the show for the first time they put All in the Family on or Taxi on, that they would make money from advertising. They'd sell 30-second spots or 60-second spots. Then the studios would take the reruns and make their money by piecing together payments from individual stations all around the country. And that was syndication.
Now, as someone that's been at the heart of the industry for many, many years, you've seen many changes. I've got to ask, how has the medium evolved? And also, I'm curious, what are significant changes that you've seen in 25 years in the representation business, specifically in TV, of course?
Well, you're right. There's been so much change. Here's what's interesting, and I've said this in other contexts, and I'll say it here. One of the things that made me created anxiety for me, that I worried about a lot as a young and mid-level agent, was how would all this pan out? Ultimately, would everything cannibalize everything else? Would the business become commoditized? The truth of the matter is, to my surprise, this was not what I predicted. There seems to be this growing appetite for content. Unlike, say, the music business, where record labels really got hurt by piracy and really got hurt by the ability of people to get music for free digitally, that hasn't happened in television. Television, there are still broadcast networks that are thriving. People love to write their obituaries It hasn't happened. I don't think it's going to happen. There are still studios that are thriving. There are still syndicated opportunities that are important. And on top of it, there's streaming services and premium cable channels and basic cable channels and international business models. And it just feels like there's room for all of it. And it may be that in different periods of time, certain platforms or certain ways of doing business will, predominate. But at least so far, there's been room for all of it, which means the business has gotten really chaotic, really broad and big, and the opportunities are really, really diverse. There's so many different ways to make television, to sell television, to negotiate television deals. The variety of shows that are available for people to watch, the order patterns, the ways these shows are budgeted, the way they're put together. I mean, it really is it's a very, very different world than when I started. But the best part about it is any of the doom and gloom that I or others might have foreseen has not come to pass.
And of course, we must mention the rise of subscription streaming models such as Netflix, Amazon and Hulu and so many others. I mean, they've all enabled many users to cut the cord and break away from their $100+ cable subscriptions. But I'm curious, how does that affect the daily business of a television agent?
It affects us in a lot of ways. The way we sell, the way we advise clients on where to take their projects, it affects the kinds of deals that we make. If you're doing trying to sell a show to a broadcast network, mostly those shows get sold in June and July and August. They mostly get written in October, November, December, and then the pilots get picked up and shot and cast in January, February. They get shot in March and April, and then all the new shows get selected in May, and the shows that are returning. That's just one slice. Now that you go to the over-the-top subscription streaming services, they don't have to buy things in a seasonal way because they're not selling advertising. It's all subscription. They can launch a show any time of year. They can buy a show any time of year. They can make a show any time of year. And so as an agent, it's really changed the nature of how we think, because instead of having to gear up for certain things happening at a certain point in time, we now have, depending upon what the show is, what the project is, who the client is, a number of options year-round. So the business has become a really year-round, 24/7 business, and that is a massive change from when I started.
So would I be right in saying that this is a great time for you now that the pot has grown for agency clients with so many cable nets and distribution points right now?
This may sound a little bit Pollyanna-ish, but I think it's always been great. Yeah. I mean, I think that the truth is that the business was easier in many respects when it was just 3 or 4 broadcast networks and maybe a handful of cable channels, because you didn't have to make as many phone calls to get something done, on the one hand. On the other hand, the kinds of shows that were made were more limited then, and the number of opportunities was fewer. So I think there are pluses to both. And over the course of a 25-year career, I think I'm in my 26th year doing this. I really feel like it's been, the entire run has been really great. It is very different now, and the way we think about selling and negotiating and navigating television is dramatically different. But not sure I would say it's either better or worse. It's pretty wonderful, and it's been great. The whole run has been great.
Now, as a man of a certain age, I remember the days of event TV and water cooler moments where everyone discussed those big episodes in the office the following day. But now, of course, we're living in a digital age of spoiler alerts and watching everything at your own pace. But one trend I have noticed is Netflix appears to be promoting the cultural conversation again. And everyone's talking about the next big must-watch show. I mean, is that something that you're noticing more and more too?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily credit Netflix with that. I think Netflix is definitely a participant in the conversation, and they're a driver of it to an extent. But if you think about it, we talk about, True Detective or Silicon Valley on HBO, or we talk about The Handmaid's Tale on Hulu, or we talk about Transparent on Amazon, or Smilf on Showtime. So I think what's really happening is all these platforms look for shows that are kind of water cooler shows that become brand identifiers for the platform. And Atlanta on FX, or Better Call Saul on AMC. I've literally now just listed, I think, 7 or 8 different platforms all of whom have shows that are water cooler shows that, have tremendous, passionate fan bases who talk about Game of Thrones on HBO, Netflix with The Crown, or Ozark, or Narcos. So the one thing about Netflix that I think you're right to identify is the sheer volume of the shows on Netflix puts them at the heart of the conversation, because there's so many, and those shows are important to different audiences. So there may be shows that, are comedic, shows that are more dramatic, shows that appeal to older audiences, younger audiences, audiences of a certain ethnicity or what. So Netflix has really sort of become kind of omnipresent in that respect, in ways that HBO, which is a much more curated experience, fewer shows, that the old saying, it's not TV, it's HBO, very, very specific. So even though a number of their shows are remarkable and very, very important and are talked about, there are not as many of them. Although I think you will see HBO spending a lot more money on their development and programming, and you'll see them expanding their offerings. I think people are going to respond to Netflix in that way.
It's a great point there. And I've got to ask as well, because there is so many platforms there and so many different outlets, like you say. I mean, how do you see this playing out? I mean, do you see anything happening in terms of potential consolidation of streaming players, such as Apple and the Hulus and the Amazons, etc.? Do you see any merging or buying each other? I mean, is that sort of merger and acquisition future, is that good for business?
So I think there could be some mergers or acquisitions. I think there could be some consolidation. I think there could also be some that just don't succeed. I mean, you think about recently, it wasn't a streaming service, but WGN, which, launched itself, had a number of shows that were relatively well received, but didn't really break through as far as being hits, and it went away. So I think you'll see, like with any business, some maturation of the business, which will include probably some M&A results, as well as just some failures. But right now, I think it's still early stages. And I also will say this, it's interesting to me that people talk about how expensive, the cable bundle is, and people wanting to, cut the cord. It's going to become very, very expensive to consume television on an a la carte basis as well. If you think about what it will cost, if you want Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, CBS All Access, HBO Go, Showtime Now, the new Disney Plus streaming service. I mean, right there, even if you just spent, $10 a month on each of those, or $5 a month on each of those, add all that up, that's a very expensive media consumption bill. And that's not including the movies that people are downloading, if they decide to buy stuff on Apple. I mean, I think there's a lot of change that will occur as we move forward, but I'm not sure how exactly it will look yet.
Absolutely. A lot of people could end up actually worse off. That's a great point.
Well, I don't know worse off, but I think it could get expensive. I don't think there's going to be necessarily for somebody that wants to watch a lot of television and consume a lot of pop culture, I'm not sure there's ever going to be a really cheap solution. I mean, think about the old days where you got your networks for free. And so, and the only way they made money was advertising. Now, people back then got all these shows for free. Nobody's getting anything for free now, it doesn't seem like.
So what does the future look like for you and ICM? And also, what role do you see technology playing in that? And what kind of opportunities or equally challenges do you think that will bring?
What's that saying, that the more things change, the more they stay the same? I think that there is a lot of change, and there are things that we're doing and ways in which we're thinking about our business, which may be different now than 20 years ago. But some of the things we do, and some of our focus is actually very much the same, which is we're looking for really, really talented people. I think that ultimately, regardless of the platforms that are created, regardless of who the corporate winners and losers are, if you represent Ellen or Chris Rock or Jerry Seinfeld or John Cena or some of the wonderful writers that we represent and other really interesting artists, comedians, musical performers, actors, writers, directors. If you have Spike Lee, who we have, it doesn't really matter how they're going to exhibit shows, what the order patterns are, what the budgets are. Great talent wins out. And so I think a lot of our focus is still very much on identifying incredible talent, taking great care of our clients, being, smart navigators and advisors for them. And so it's a combination of doing the things we've always done in terms of reading scripts, listening to music, watching performances, and hopefully having the taste and judgment to know who's special, and then keeping current on all the business developments so we can make the proper matches and give the right advice to help people kind of move forward in what you're right to say is a really ever-changing and dramatically kinetic landscape.
I love the line you used a few moments ago there. You said that the more things change, equally they can stay the same. And I think one thing that has stayed the same is everything is great, and it's always been great. We're still enjoying entertainment. We're still consuming it in different ways, but we're still consuming that great content. But just talking to you today has been so insightful, so revealing. I'm interested in what the listeners are going to come back with, but I've just really enjoyed talking with you today. So a big thank you and taking that time to come and speak with us.
Well, Neil, I've enjoyed it too. I'm flattered that you were interested in having me on and love being a part of it. I hope it's helpful to people who are listening, and cheers to you.
I love chatting with Ted today for a variety of reasons. I mean, before we even talk about the subject matter, I loved his very personal story and a journey that took him from a trained boxer and a former US attorney who once indicted the head of Colombia's Cali drug cartel and got to go from that world to Hollywood. And we do hear a lot about the cord-cutting generation in a digital world of online streaming. And I think we've all seen television evolve right before our eyes. But I found today's conversation with Ted about his experience, his insights, and showing how he has seen the industry evolve from inside the heart of the industry to be completely fascinating, intriguing, revealing, and most of all, invaluable. And that is why I record this show every day. And hopefully we can all learn together about how every industry is being transformed by technology, and by most part in a good way. But this is where I hand over the microphone to you. I mean, you've heard my thoughts here in the UK, you've heard Ted's from the heart of the entertainment industry, but wherever you listen to this country in 165 countries, I know that you have something to say and something to share on this subject too. So please, email me directly. My door is always open. techblogwriter@outlook.com. My Twitter and Instagram is the same username, @NeilC.Hughes. And remember, keep those iTunes ratings and reviews coming in too, because they help this podcast charm the algorithms out there in Internet land that smile favourably to this podcast and bring more listeners to the show. So predictably, I will return tomorrow with another great guest who will share how technology is transforming their industry. But right now, just a big warm thank you from yours truly for listening to this tech podcast. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.